First of all, let me introduce who's with me here today. Some are known to you and some are, excuse me, maybe a little less known. But with me, of course, is, where did he go? There he is, there's Terry. The Director of DEM, Terry Gray, who has been a great partner since I became Attorney General, and actually was a great partner even before then when I was in federal service. Terry, thanks for coming. We have, obviously, Aaron Gukian. Did I pronounce that right, Aaron?
Yes, sir.
Who is now with the Rhode Island Dental Association and is a great advocate for dentistry and access to dental care. Dr. Greg Stepka is with us. Dr. Andrew Gazzaro is with us. I'm sorry.
Beth Lamro.
Beth Lamro.
Yes.
Thank you. And Beth Lamro is here as well. So thank you for joining us, Beth. All right, so you may be wondering why, in the context of an environmental case, I have two dentists standing up here, and we're going to get to that. So first, let's talk about the Barletta case. The Barletta case, as you know, has been lingering in the Providence County Superior Court for some time. And it is born out of the 610 Connector Project, which has a long and tortured history in its own right. But the bottom line with respect to the case is this. And these are facts that, regardless of what you may hear from Barletta today, because getting them to this point was not easy, and the extent to which they understand what they did and why it matters is not entirely clear to me even today. But the fact of the matter is, this is what happened, and this is what they have admitted to by virtue of the civil settlement that we filed in Superior Court today to resolve this case. They have admitted that they brought contaminated fill from Massachusetts to Rhode Island and lied about it. Tons of material from Massachusetts that was contaminated. It wasn't hazardous, but it was contaminated for certain. And they had an obligation, both by contract and under the law, to bring only approved fill by DEM to that site for obvious reasons. They knew that was their obligation. They ignored that obligation for expediency, if nothing else. And then when they were confronted by DOT and DEM, they lied. And that is why the price of this case for them is unprecedented and extraordinarily high. Now, you may remember that the federal authorities were also involved in this case and disposed of it about a year and a half ago. And in the context of that case, they resolved their case with a penalty payment by Barletta of $1 million. And when the federal government settled that case, that was a fork in the road for this office. We had to decide whether we would continue with our state case and under what circumstances, or to simply agree that the resolution by the federal government would be sufficient to hold Barletta accountable for the conduct that I just mentioned, and as I said, conduct that they have admitted to. There's no dispute that those are the facts, and I want to make that very clear today. And it was very clear to me then that $1 million was insufficient for the conduct that I just described. That $1 million would not, a payment of $1 million by Barletta would not reflect the gravity of what they did and the fact that they lied about it. And so we filed criminal charges against them and we went forward. We fought through a number of attempts by Barletta, and they changed counsel seemingly every day. But we won all of the skirmishes, and we were prepared to try this criminal case. But when you have a case against a company, and the conduct of the individual here in context is not as significant. He's been fired, and justifiably so, Mr. Ferrara. But what the key here is, what do we do with this company? And we did not have the evidence to charge the corporate officials in this case, or we would have charged them. So we charged the case that we had back when we charged it. But it was clear to me that for Barletta, for there to be any hope, at least, that Barletta learned their lesson, they were going to have to pay a lot more. And we've reached that point. I worked out the figure myself with then counsel for Barletta at least 8-9 months ago. And that figure then was $10 million, and that figure today is $10 million, and that number never moved. That number never moved over the last 10 months, with one exception, that in recent months, I have also insisted that Barletta pay an additional $1 million to reflect the work of this office, to hold them to account. I've got plenty to do here, and Barletta knew what it did a long time ago, and it was not necessary for it to take this long. But it has taken this long, and as a result, they're paying an additional $1 million, $750,000 to this office and $250,000 to DEM. So that is the resolution of the case against Barletta. It was once a criminal case. From the beginning, it could have been a civil case, so we filed a civil lawsuit against them today. The money has already been wired. The $11 million has already been wired to where it needs to go, and we'll get into that in a minute, but the money is in hand, and so we will be, if we haven't already, dismissing that civil case against Barletta today. And so that $10 million is a win for Rhode Islanders, and I'm going to explain how it's a win and what that means for dental care in a minute. So, like any case, well, before I say that, you may ask, like, where's in the AG's office, why was I looking for effectively attorney's fees? Well, the reason for that is, if you remember, the General Assembly, and I want to thank the General Assembly for continuously acknowledging the work of this office and investing in it. So if you recall, we received from the General Assembly 15 positions, I believe it was in 2023. But what we received was not the funding to support them. And so we have been supporting those positions from a fund which includes, at the time, I think it was around $15 million in legal fees that we recovered from the opioid companies when we sued them. And so that money pays for those 15 positions, but obviously over time that money is depleted. It'll pay for them for the foreseeable future, but as a steward of this office, as I hand it off to somebody else at the end of next year, I want that money to be continuously replenished. And so the $750,000 will go into that fund, as will other settlements of this type when it comes to legal fees, to make sure that we have the resources to bring these kinds of cases and frankly be as aggressive as we have been here and elsewhere. And so that's where that money will go, that $1 million will go. It would not be appropriate for me not to say what I'm about to say about the work here by the DEM and the prosecutors of this office. Sheila Paquette did, I don't know if she's here, I know she was over at the courthouse, but if she is here, is she here? She's not behind me, she didn't sneak in behind me, I don't think. Thanks, Terry. But when Sheila gets here, you know, I'll have a chance at a minimum to talk to her afterwards, but she was really dogged in this investigation. You know, there were opportunities for other state agencies, frankly, to get involved, and they didn't do it for whatever reason. But DEM, like a dog with a bone, really stayed on this one, and because of their great work, you know, this case eventually got cracked. And look, DEM had, until recently at least, has not had the kinds of resources to easily do these cases. So Terry, I'm really grateful to you for keeping some of your resources where they're desperately needed in these kinds of cases. And Sergeant Paquette, Sheila Paquette, just did an amazing job. We had a bunch of lawyers that worked on this case: Steve Dambrook, John Morera, Among them, Allison Carney from our Civil Division. This was a joint effort by our two groups, and they really did just an amazing job. Okay, so what to do with the $10 million? How do we use that $10 million to benefit Rhode Island and link it to 610? And we had a lot of conversations about that. We reached out, for example, to counsel for families who lived in the neighborhood when there were some dust issues out there. But they relayed back to us that they were going to follow their own course, and I respect that, and that's the most appropriate legal thing, frankly, for us and them to do, since we represent the state generally and not individuals. And so we spent some time thinking about how do we ensure that this money actually impacts people that at a minimum have some link to that area. And it was last summer because I got I had the team reprint the article that I remember made a really large impression on me, and it was written by Johnny Williams of the Providence Journal. I don't know if Johnny's here today. Is Johnny here? Well, Johnny, your reporting left me heartbroken and speechless. And I'm sure you remember the story that I'm talking about, since you wrote it after all, and you know this is about dental care. But the article, the story begins with Dr. Stepka, who does a lot of work in the schools, particularly the Providence schools. And as he put it, he has examined the teeth of thousands of students in Providence. But there's one student in particular that haunts him to this day, and it was a 7-year-old girl, I believe it was, right, doctor? And she spoke Spanish, and the good doctor speaks a little Spanish, so that's a credit to him as well. And she was crying. And you know, he promised that everything would be okay, and they did a pinky swear if he could look in her mouth. And when she opened her mouth and he saw her bottom teeth, he knew instantly, right, doctor? You tell him. What did you know?
I mean, they all have to be extracted. I mean, it's just awful to see.
So this little girl had to have all of her bottom teeth taken out. I mean, think about that for a minute. That changes your life forever. It literally changes your life forever. It's about self-confidence as you grow older. There's no child in Rhode Island, that should face that experience. I raised 2 children. They had dental care. So the thing they didn't worry about was their teeth. You know, I'm looking back at some of my staff here, including Keith Hoffman, who's worked on our lead paint project. And, you know, Keith could tell me I won't get it right, but it's more than 10%. I think it approaches 20% of kids that Keith is nodding that are lead poisoned in the Providence school systems. You get 20% that are lead poisoned. You've got little girls like this one, and she's not alone, sadly. In 2024, 1 in 4 Providence elementary and middle school students had unmet dental care needs. And we're not talking about they needed a cleaning, although they weren't getting those either. They had deep cavities and gum infections, and 520 students required urgent care for abscesses, tooth decay, and infections. How do we expect children in Providence and elsewhere to get good grades and function if their teeth hurt and they're lead poisoned? You know, we talk a lot about how the scores aren't where they are, and that's, you know, the teacher's fault. But the truth is, we're all at fault, at a minimum, if we as a people can't provide basic health care and dental care to our citizens. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. And I couldn't read that article about that little girl and not talk to my team and Terry and his team and talk about trying to do something. Because it's pretty clear that if we don't do something, frankly, nobody else is. Right? There's no move in this state. There's no momentum to lift Medicaid reimbursements the way there should be. We talk about it, but we're not committed to doing it. so that we have more dentists who will take Medicaid. We're not serious about that. We're not serious about fixing our primary care problem because we're not serious about spending the money to do it. And we don't think about dental care for an 8-year-old child when we're building our budgets. It's not the heart of what we do when we do our budgeting. It's at the outside. It's viewed as optional. Well, for me, and I think for most Rhode Islanders, and I know for the people behind me, it is not optional for children to get basic dental care. We should all be ashamed of ourselves after today, after you wrote your story, Johnny, if one more child, for lack of dental care, loses a tooth, let alone all of the bottom teeth. When government doesn't intervene, when these facts are right in front of us, hey, who are we? And so, I don't know exactly how we're going to spend this $10 million yet, but I know one thing. It's going to be spent on dental care for children who can't get access to dental care. That's where it's going to go. And it's going to be focused on kids who live in those 3 neighborhoods closest to 610. And if we can expand that out, we will. You know, this should be the beginning, frankly, of an acknowledgement by government that we have failed the people of the state of Rhode Island when it comes to dental care and health care and committing ourselves to fixing it. And you're gonna hear more from this office about healthcare generally next week. All right, so we got $10 million. It's gonna go to the Rhode Island Foundation. There will be an advisory committee, someone that I and my successors will appoint, someone that the Rhode Island Foundation will appoint to gather ideas to get this money into the field quickly. Now, whether that means mobile dental units or something else, I don't know. But we're gonna be relying on our friends in the, you know, what I learned when we've talked a lot about healthcare is where do the ideas come from? Not from people like me. They come from people like them, okay? People who work every day with children and know what it takes to make their lives better. So that's where the money's gonna go. It's gonna go to children's health, first and foremost. We're gonna get great ideas from people who are already doing it. There are a lot of doctors, like the ones next to me, and others. Dr. Fatini, as she goes by, her last name is Dionysopoulos. I have a lot of Greek friends, so I feel like I did a good job of that last name. But she goes by Dr. Fatini. She wishes she could be here. She's president of the Rhode Island Dental Association. I have no doubt that she's buried in some kid's mouth or some today as we speak. God bless her. But we're gonna get great ideas from the Dental Association with Aaron's help and the dentist's help. And we're gonna move this ball forward. And my hope is that others will join with us. 10 million can be everything we spend, or it can be a start. And my hope is that others will see the need here and match the money, contribute to the fund. We'll figure out a way to keep this going. And you know, I want every kid to have a smile they're proud of. I mean, my parents did that for us when I was growing up. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And I want every kid to be able to open, even braces today are much more fun than they were when I was a kid. Whether it's braces or, you know, nice white teeth, even the fillings are white now. I want kids to be proud of their smiles. So doctors, thank you. And look, you know, I want to thank the boots on the ground. I don't know if Sheila's come in yet. Did she come in?
Yes.
Where is she? She snuck in. I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
You were, as I said earlier, you were like a dog with a bone. And you fought where others stood aside. And I'm proud that people are standing behind us and not against the wall. These people behind us get it. And we're going to together fix this problem with the public's help. So I think we'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions, and you can ask questions of anyone behind me as well.
How did you arrive at that 10 million plus the extra $1 million figure when talking with Barletta?
Yeah, you know, I was their former counsel, Al Medici, and I go back a long way. We were prosecutors together, and I thought that if it was gonna mean something, I thought 10 times what the federal government recovered would be a good place to start. I think the maximum we could have achieved at trial, had we taken it all the way through and won every fight, which is, you know, as we see, is not by any means a guarantee, would have been about 15 million. So I thought that $10 million sent the right message that this was serious conduct. And that was the number I gave Al, and that hasn't changed since that conversation, other than to add the $1 million later. So, you know, Barletta, for whatever reason, had a hard time coming to grips that we were serious. You know, you can change all the lawyers you want, but Al and I had that thing worked out, I don't know, 12 months ago, 9 months ago. So it took longer than it should have. You know, we've delayed getting, money out to children who need it, but we stood firm, and, you know, the team, John Marrera and Steve Damrock, were ready to try this case. They've been working really hard. They've been prepping witnesses. I pulled them out of some of those meetings, guys, so thank you. You could have snuck up here too, but, you know, they're a little shy sometimes. So that's how we got there. It seemed appropriate to me, it sent the right message, and it hurts. I mean, I think one of the reasons that Barletta took so long to come to the table, spending $10 million that's a lot of money, but it represents the scope of the harm here. Yes?
So you have that money in hand, when can you expect it to start flowing?
As fast as possible. Keith and I, who's been sort of my point on this, is as soon as we can get a good plan in place, and get it out to children, we're gonna do that. It's gonna be a matter, I hope, of months or weeks and not years. I mean, my goal is to get this thing moving. If for no other reason, you know, I'm not gonna be here for, I got 18 months to go. I wanna see movement. You know, what I found, I felt this way as U.S. attorney, right? You're only given so many years to accomplish the kinds of things you wanna accomplish. And this will go on after I'm gone, but I wanna see real results as soon as we can. I mean, we've got the dentists ready to do it. We need to attract more dentists to Rhode Island. We need to raise Medicaid rates. We need to bring some of the commercial insurers to the table. We need to do that in healthcare generally. Again, that's a subject for next week, more robustly. But we can get this done. I mean, there isn't a dentist that I know that won't help out here. I'm really grateful to them. And we've had some really good discussions, and Aaron has brought in a bunch of dentists. We've had some really good conversations about how they can help.
So just a quick follow-up question, sorry. This might be a better question for the dentists. What might that look like?
I don't know how much we know yet, but they're happy to share their thoughts. Anyone?
I'll defer to Aaron. Aaron's has a couple great initiatives, so.
Sure.
Sure.
The first thing I'd like to say is if you can't chew, you can't eat. And that's a really important message. I also want to acknowledge our whole oral health community, which is the hygienists, the dental assistants, and the front office staff. I see Carrie here from the CCRI, Community College of Rhode Island Lincoln campus, the hygiene school. It's the only accredited hygiene school in the state. Also, Dr. Knapp from the American Dental Association, Dr. Hartman, and many others. To answer your question, I did work at the Rhode Island Foundation for 5 years, which is helpful under the great Neil Steinberg. And we have a whole plan. I would say, one, we have Colgate Bright Smiles, Bright Futures, which always has a signed agreement with the city of Providence and the state that's rippling through our elementary schools. It's a free oral health platform. It's in multiple languages, and they also give free dental supplies. Second, Senator Tierra Mack was very, very helpful. My father's back there from Washington Park and Attorney General, but Juanita Sanchez, I worked with the Providence Career and Technical Academy with Brett Dickens, and there's a oral health career pathway, which is another way to build the pipeline. Third, you got these dental mobile units. There's something called the Molar Express, which is at CCAP, which is a federally qualified health center, but because that grant is funded by the Ronald McDonald House, it's only in certain areas it couldn't go into Providence. So that's a problem. We don't have a dental school here. And then finally, with the legislature and the Attorney General and the Governor and multiple other people, our legislative champions like the Speaker and the Senate President, who has passed, this is one of his legacies, and Senator Gallo and Representative Joe McNamara, what we did was we passed the Medicaid code for a facility fee. So I also want to really emphasize our IDD, or special needs community. I have parents calling me every single day saying my children can't get oral health help. And you're talking about pain. This isn't rolling an ankle. You can die from a tooth infection. And so we got to work. Dr. Fred Hartman, the great oral surgeon back there, Dr. Brown, Dr. Benz, and many others, they take care of these children at the Samuel Center, but there's no place for them to go because of the facility fee. So we went from $250 to $1,254. Now, with these ambulatory surgical centers, we can get through this with these emergent dental care. There's over 500 children alone, 84 kids from George J. West that need emergent dental care that require anesthesia. So what we're doing is we're working with the ambulatory surgical centers. We're trying to expand the certificate of need with I really, really beg that the governor allows this because it's an emergency situation to get through the process. And so we can get to work. And with all of that and the help of the American Dental Association, the Rhode Island Dental Association, the hygiene, the assistants, I know one thing about working with Governor Kachiri is that we're a small state, but we can get in the room, we can fix the problem. So problem, solution, we got the data, and last thing, my chief of staff, Beth Lamoureux, and I went to Connecticut College, and I had an intern named Bridget Mason, who went to Connecticut College from East Greenwich. And what you can do with 2 people and a paid intern is incredible. She got all the data, everything, to Johnny and the whole team and to Greg to advocate. And we've done something special. This is the proudest moment other than having my kids ever had. And I can't tell you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so you can see we have a lot of people were ready to dive in, and now we have the financial wherewithal to begin to do that work. Patrick, you had a question?
Yeah, if you could elaborate on, you said, I guess last summer, I think if I have the timing right, the number was basically agreed to. What was Barletta demanding, if they were demanding something, to not settle the case, if the number was basically agreed?
Yeah, I think there was some language, some technical language, but I really think like, how do I put this? I think it was somebody taught me once when I first started practicing, the best way to settle a case is to be ready to try it, okay? And what we've tried to do in this office, whether it's prospect or it's something like this, is let the people that we're negotiating know that we are ready to go all the way. And you can only go all the way if you have people like John and Steve, and the sergeant are ready to go with you. So whether it was like getting your head around $10 million, I mean, it was agreed to with council that I don't want to say it was agreed to. That was the number that I agreed to, okay? And they knew what it was, and it hasn't changed. So there haven't been more negotiations about the number, is what I meant when I said that. So, you know, I can't tell you, Patrick, exactly what was going on in their heads, but it seemed like, okay, they've agreed to it, well then they haven't agreed to it. And we're gonna change lawyers, and I don't know if people think that if you change lawyers, or you pick a lawyer that I know and is gonna change, that's not the way it works. Like, we figure out what we think does justice, and then we do it. And if you take it, you take it. And if you don't, we're gonna go to trial. This trial gets closer. If you're ready, and the team got ready, and they worked hard to get ready, it was not a matter of just a few days, it was a lot of days with a lot of witnesses, you know, a lot of DEM experts we needed. We needed an expert from New Jersey on what is solid waste, and as somebody who has personally tried a solid waste case, it's not as easy as you think. I know, because I lost that case, over whether it was solid waste or not. I thought it was, the jury did not, you know, that's ancient history. So that's what I meant, Patrick. You know, I think that whether it was, there was, you know, technical language they didn't like, or they couldn't get their head around the number, or they thought we weren't serious, or they thought hiring 5 different lawyers would change what I thought. Bottom line is, we didn't move off the number. They finally, you know, gave in, and here we are.
And then on doing, I understand the motivation for having this money go to these, go to dental care.
Yeah.
But another option, as this was a state transportation project, and
Yeah.
federally and state paid for, would be to have the settlement money go to the state. What was your thinking about having this money go through the Rhode Island Foundation and instead of just having the money go to the state?
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure, you know, I don't craft budgets, and I had really good conversations with the Speaker and the Senate President before we decided to go this route. This is not a typical multi-state where by state law the money has to go to the General Assembly. That's not how I read it, but I wanted to be respectful of state leadership, and so I talked to the late Senate President. Certainly we had communications with the new Senate President, but this was, as I said, this construct had been worked out, including the settlement agreement, you know, literally months ago, so nothing really changed. So I wanted them to understand what I hope to do with it. They were supportive, both the Senate President and the Speaker. So why not just put it in the general fund? Because I feel that what Barletta did, and I think the team, the DEM team agrees, in fact I'm confident they do, they impacted that neighborhood. You know, these are the kinds of neighborhoods that tend to get impacted by bad actors like Barletta. Like, who cares what's in the material? The people who live there are powerless. They don't have a voice. They're not gonna be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and complain. Nobody's gonna fight for them. And so they have their own lawyers, and that's the good news. Their lawyers, you know, if there's a civil action against Barletta, they'll pursue it, and that happens all the time. But I felt like we should do something. This is a lot of money. I mean, just to put it in perspective, this is a lot. $10 million is a lot of money. And I wanted it to be used for kids who are facing a crisis but live near that area. And that's why it will primarily go to kids who live in the West End, Olneyville, and Silver Lake neighborhoods. Now, that doesn't mean we can't expand it. That's not what it means. But that's where we want to start, because I felt like the families that lived in that neighborhood bore the brunt of this when it was going on. And look, I have no doubt that there are families that are there now that weren't there then, that were there then, that aren't there now, but you know, you can only pick certain moments of time and do the best you can.
Do you have
That's how we
examples
came
of
here.
how families there were affected by the action of bringing in this non-compliant?
Well, there's been some
soil?
reporting by some outlets about how there was dust in the air and the dust ended up in the backyards, and you know, there may have been health concerns about that, and that's why those families hired counsel. And as I said, the litigation team had contact with them. And their response back to us was that, you know, they wanted to pursue their rights on their own. And that makes sense, as I've said many times before, when the state sues or brings a criminal action or brings an action against Trump. I mean, it's on behalf of the people as a whole, not you or me individually. So the question was, we've got this large amount of money, how do we use it? How do we use it in a way that is where there's incredible need, as I think we've demonstrated, and then how do we link it back to that area as opposed, you know, to other places where I'm sure there's also need. And the broader point is we should be in a position where it doesn't take a $10 million settlement from this office to fix the state of dental access for children in the state. That should be something we should just be doing, as I said earlier, because it's the right thing to do.
Can we hear from Director Gray, just from
course.
the environmental perspective, why this behavior is so problematic? What kind of lasting impact could it have?
Good morning. Thanks for the question. First off, I want to start off by saying how thankful I am to the Attorney General's office and their team for really pushing this case and bringing it to the point where we're standing here this morning. I think the reason why mismanagement of contaminated soil is such a big deal is because of the health impacts that the General talked about. You have a wide range of contamination that's coming into a community that shouldn't have come into the community. And that's pollution that we shouldn't have to deal with. And when you talk about that type of pollution, it can manifest itself in all kinds of exposures and impacts and all kinds of health impacts in particular. So taking the funds from this particular settlement and investing it in children's health in that community, I think will go a long way towards mitigating the general impacts that may have happened out there.
Were there any impacts that DEM knows of specifically to the residents or the environment in that community from exactly what Barletta admitted to?
No, I think the issue was the biggest impact was exactly what the General talked about, which was during the construction of the highway and during the management of the soil, There were dust issues that were created in the neighborhood. We responded to several of those, some in real time, some after the fact, and that went into building this case.
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, Terry, I just want to make it clear that while we're not talking about, this is not hazardous waste. So the statutes make a distinction between hazardous waste and solid waste. Hazardous waste, obviously is a more serious problem. That's not to minimize this one. And particularly if my old friend Marty Capelli, who you remember, Terry, if Marty Capelli was one of the best environmental investigators I ever knew. I did cases with him. He was with me on that solid waste case we lost. It wasn't his fault. But he used to get outraged by out-of-state waste. So part of what makes this egregious is that, we're taking Massachusetts stone that had, railroad, they took it out of a railroad project, so it had steel plates in it, so it was not clean fill, it needed to be. So this was solid waste, wasn't hazardous waste, but still, that we have solid waste laws on the books for a reason. And again, what made this particularly egregious to me, and I think the team, was that not only was it out-of-state waste, but once it was identified as out-of-state waste, it was represented to be clean when it wasn't clean. It was contaminated, it wasn't hazardous, but it wasn't clean. And their obligation was to deliver clean fill. And as I think the director said when we announced the case together, a lot of the fill has been now buried out there, and it does not make any sense from an environmental protection perspective to dig it up and remove it. So we kind of are where we are, and hopefully that project lasts for a long time, and we know where it is, and if anyone needs to go out there, 20, 30 years down the road, maybe hopefully longer, they'll know where it is and can address it then. Are there other questions? Yes?
I know you mentioned that state law doesn't require settlement money to go to the legislature. I'm just wondering, is there precedent in your office for this kind of, arrangement with, directing money from settlement to a nonprofit? Have you done that before?
The prior administration did it much more frequently than I did. So there was a Volkswagen case involving lying about the amount of, from diesel engines, the amount of toxins that were going into the air. So the prior administration under Attorney General Peter Kilmartin distributed that money to some environmental groups back, before I became Attorney General. I've tried to be I just acted a little differently. This case is different from some of the other cases where we've recovered monies on behalf. Take the opioids, for example. We were able to recover an additional $15 million in fees in that case, which has come to us. There are people who disagree on the scope of that statute. My view, frankly, is that this office should be allowed to keep more of the proceeds to help us function. Those 15 people that the General Assembly, the Speaker, and the former Senate President were good enough to provide to this office 2 years ago. Well, they come to work every day on behalf of the taxpayers, residents, being paid for by the opioid companies. That's a win for everybody. But I don't think the office should be funded that way, big picture. But I do think when the team works really hard and there's a recovery of some magnitude, then a portion of the recovery, above and beyond what you think the appropriate amount for recovery is, ought to be invested back into the office, because I understand the difficult financial times that the Speaker and the Senate President, the whole General Assembly are dealing with. Other questions? Well, if not, thank you. It's a really good day. Hey, Patrick.
Do you know if, with this settlement, the Barletta will be allowed to bid on federal projects again? Is there any language in the settlement that addresses that, whether they will be allowed to get out of the voluntary exclusion?
Yeah, that's really between them and state and particularly federal regulators. I don't know the answer to that question. I do know this, that whether it will or it won't, our position in this case hasn't changed. It's been $10 million, 10 times what they pay to the federal government, because that will make a difference, and it represents the severity of the conduct. How they interface with federal highway and other regulators is not something that I really care about. It's a collateral issue that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, does this number represent the seriousness of the conduct? Will it do good for Rhode Islanders, and I think both of those things have been achieved. I'm really grateful, as I said, to the environmental team and the litigation team from the criminal division, who did a really, I mean, we don't get to this moment, but for literally more than hundreds, high hundreds of hours by investigators, prosecutors, and civil attorneys, working hard and getting ready to try a case that I think the judge had set aside at least a month to try. So, you know, this would have been a long and difficult trial, for sure. Any other questions?
How many witnesses were prepped for the upcoming trial?
Steve, you have a number, a round number?
Probably about 50 or more.
50. So, I know this, when I need to find Steve, I often couldn't find him. But, because he was, I think, didn't you do most of it in Kent?
We were actually, Director Gray made some space available for us, and myself, John, and Sheila spent a whole lot of time meeting with all sorts of witnesses.
Yeah, so I would call Steve up, and it would be, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm prepping witnesses. Well, okay, fine, but I need you to help me with this problem. So thanks, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you, Sheila, very, very much. All right, anything else? Thanks for coming, everybody. It's a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.